So I got to do something that I never thought I would get to do. And I went to 6 NFL games in 13 days. This is something, like I said, I never thought I would get to do. And basically, this is how it all started. In the summer of 2021, I realized that I'm going to school this year. I'm finally going away to school. I'm at Florida State University now, and I realized, well, I still want to go to some NFL games. So I decided there were a few that I needed to prioritize. Firstly, before I left for school, I needed to go to a game with my buddies before I left, just as like a last hoorah. And then obviously there was a game the Bills played in Jacksonville this year. And as a Bills fan, I was like, need to go to that game because Jacksonville's only about a few hour drive from Tallahassee, Florida, where Florida State is. And so those were the few that I knew I was going to go to. But while I was thinking about this, I realized that there were more games I wanted to go to. But that's also glossing over the fact that there were some tremendous games played at Florida State University this year, so I have to mention those. And these other games that I saw the opportunity in really were around the time between semesters at Florida State. I realized, wow, I have a big gap there. And when you go into the real world and get a job, it's something that you're just not going to have the opportunity to do anymore. And although it's a big price tag, it's just this time span that I'm taking off for this immense trip, really I won't have the time for in the future. So I think it was definitely worth the opportunity. So I planned ahead and made a schedule. As it's one of my bucket list items to see every NFL stadium. So that is definitely a huge reason why I prioritize this so much. And if you can see right here, this is a little thing back there that shows every NFL stadium you've been to, and you scratch one off of it when you're done, when you've went there. So the games I planned to attend for the season were November 18th, the Patriots at Falcons, December 12th, the Bills at the Buccaneers, December 16th, Chiefs at Chargers, December 19th, Seahawks at Rams, December 20th, Vikings at Bears, December 23rd, 49ers at Titans, December 25th, Browns at Packers, and January 2nd, Rams at Ravens. So, how'd that actually go? Well, you may have noticed that first one, November 18th, Patriots at Falcons, kind of acted as a roadmap for me. It was the first game that I was doing, and it was a small trip to Atlanta during the semester. And yes, sadly, I missed my Friday classes that day. Don't tell anyone. But, the following day, rather. But it was really a test to see how I could do traveling by myself for an NFL game. So that didn't disappoint us at all. Honestly, Mercedes-Benz Stadium may have been my favorite stadium I saw of the entire trip. It was amazing, and one of the craziest things about it is you would think that you would have to charge such high prices for something like this. It's a magnificent stadium. A few other ones that I saw later could have rivaled it, but at the same time, concessions were dirt cheap there. You only had to pay like $2 for a small soda and $4 for a larger soda, and they were refillable, which is unheard of at any other NFL stadium. I just couldn't imagine that. And I got to watch a competitive game into the third quarter, which I was questioning because I thought New England completely outmatched the Atlanta Falcons. But ultimately, I did get to see them in the end outmatch the Atlanta Falcons and see the best coach in NFL history smother an opposing offense. And it was a good start to my little go around in terms of actually attending games. And this was my first NFL game I attended that did not include the Buffalo Bills in it. The Atlanta Falcons playing the New England Patriots was a good start for me, and I really enjoyed my experience in Atlanta. Then, obviously, I had to go back to school for a little while, finished up my finals. But the day I finished my final, I immediately drove down to Tampa Bay. And in Tampa, you may think, oh, okay, he's going to stay in Tampa, and then he's going to go to the Bills-Bucks game. No, actually what ended up happening is I had to fly out of Tampa to go back home to Buffalo, New York, where I'm from, and meet up for a specific family event that would take one day and then have an immediate turnaround to fly back to Tampa and go to the Bills-Bucks game. So that's exactly what I did. So that was just a fun experience. But then actually talking about the Bills-Buccaneers game, Uh, man, what a crazy ending. First off, I think that's the first thing I have to point to. But now I have a buddy who's living in Tampa, who's also from my hometown, that I got to stay with, and it was good to see him for the first time in a while. And I was just, I thought the best part of the Tampa experience, although the rest of the games fell outside of my Buffalo Bills realm, in terms of within my trip, this was one game that I was like, okay, I'll go watch the Bills. But the reason for avoiding the Bills most of my trip was actually just so I didn't have that, like, oh man, I don't want to go watch the Bills play and then be upset if they lose. If I watch two teams that I don't care about either way, then I won't be mad if either of them wins. And I think that was honestly a good choice for the most part. But even when the Bills were down early in that game, it was really funny. Some of the stuff the Bills fans were saying to the Bucs fans, and I think the Buccaneers fans and the sections I was sitting in were actually getting pretty upset by the fact that the Bills fans were not more upset that they were losing by such a large margin early in the game. But what a crazy way that one turned out. Then, from Tampa, this is where the fun really begins, and I started taking long flights. What's really interesting with some airfare for these trips that I learned is sometimes they'll just like make you take more flights but charge you a cheaper amount. So I was just like, hey, I'll take the cheaper amount, but my flights from Tampa to LA lasted a total of 19 hours in flight time. So I had a flight from Tampa Bay that went to Charlotte, North Carolina, and the flight from Charlotte, North Carolina went to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then Fort Lauderdale, Florida went finally to Los Angeles, California. And let me just tell you, that is a very interesting experience having flights that last that long. But it helped me really get used to the flights, and by the time I was on my last flight, I was just like, ugh, man, I'm like used to this. I'm almost like a pro now for how much traveling I was doing. But then I also had a fun experience when I got to the airport in LA. My phone would not work because my family had changed SIM cards, and luckily I got a SIM card soon thereafter. But there was a time period for about maybe 30 minutes where I landed in LAX and was just like, how am I going to contact my family who's actually out in LA? And then I got to end up staying with them for the game. So up to this point, I had a really simple little trip in terms of being able to stay with people everywhere I had gone, except for Atlanta. I stayed in a hotel one night in Atlanta, but it wasn't a long-term trip, so it was kind of simple. But then, of course, finally, I'm in LA. LA, let me tell you, the one thing that I will never be able to get over is the traffic there. There's a lot of other cool parts of LA, but traffic kills it, and I think that's one reason I'll never be able to live there. As for the game in LA, though, boy, this game did not disappoint. This was the game that arguably made me want to go on the trip. Thursday Night Football, the Los Angeles Chargers battling the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, that game could not have been more exciting and came down to the wire. What a great battle between quarterbacks, really high scoring OT game. Travis Kelce scores the game winner. That was awesome. Really happy to see those guys. Just the way that game played out was so fun, and really for me even more so because I got to really pick on the Chargers for finally, losing a game because I thought they were being too aggressive on fourth down all year, and it didn't bite them in the butt until finally I was at the game to watch it bite them in the butt. So that was really entertaining. But then, as I said earlier, with how my trip was scheduled, I was supposed to watch the next game that was occurring in LA on Sunday as well. And I thought this would be a good way to watch two games pretty easily, not have to do as much traveling. But COVID broke for the Los Angeles Rams, and their game against the Seattle Seahawks had gotten rescheduled for Tuesday. Some may think, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Just wait for the game Tuesday. Well, if I go back to my schedule, I was supposed to be headed to Chicago for a game on Monday night. So I decided rather than waiting for the game on Tuesday, I sold my ticket for that game between the Seahawks and Rams. I decided, where can I go that's on the path to Chicago this Sunday that is going to be an exciting game? And boy, I was not disappointed, because although I missed out on watching one Super Bowl team, I got to watch the other team that's battling for the Super Bowl this weekend, and I headed to Denver to watch the Denver Broncos compete against the the Cincinnati Bengals. And wow, that game, I can't. Looking back at that, just seeing where both those teams have ended up now, it's surprising how close that game really came down to in the end. But Denver was a great feel. But this is where I started to run into some issues with my trip. First off, if you are booking stuff and you want to do something like this in your future, I would highly advise you to wait, if you can, until you're 21. If I did this next year, I would have had such a much easier time. I'm only 20 years old right now, and some hotels will not let you stay in them until you're 21 years old. So I booked a hotel in Denver, and then I realized, oh, I can't stay there because I'm not 21. So I had to book a motel that was fairly far outside the city, and it just made traveling a bigger issue and stuff. So that was the one thing. But the game in Denver, really solid game, even though Denver played really solid defense. I thought the Bengals were maybe going to be able to pull away in that one. They never really did, but also the Broncos really got hurt because that was the game where they lost Teddy Bridgewater, and he couldn't come back in for the rest of the game. So you could argue that took him out of it, but Drew Lock led him on a touchdown drive after that, and it was still a pretty exciting one. Then I got to go to Chicago. These are a bunch of places I really have never been before, and headed out of Denver really early in the morning. Let me tell you, if you are anywhere that isn't high Uber or Lyft trafficked in terms of me having to stay at this motel outside of the city, and you're looking for a ride at like 4 a.m. from a motel, you will have a hefty fee to pay. But as anyone also probably knows, if you're looking to get Lyfted or Ubered after or near the start of an NFL game, near an NFL stadium, you will be paying a hefty fee for that as well. So let me say the car rides were not a cheap thing at any points on these trips, except for in Green Bay. So that was the only one where it was kind of nice. So I got to Chicago. This was the first time I ended up staying in a hostel. I had not really heard of or like understood what a hostel was exactly. I still got my own private room, which was a little bit of an upcharge. But man, hostels are great deals in terms of like shared spaces, and then just like kind of a good opportunity to interact with people. If I was staying for more than a day or two in Chicago rather, and really was not trying to catch up on some rest that I needed from the past few days, there was a lot of good opportunities to meet people in hostels and have some conversations with them in common areas and other stuff. As for the game in Chicago, the Monday night game was between Chicago and Minnesota. It ended up being pretty well handled by Minnesota in the end, even though Chicago outgained them in terms of yardage. And I think my favorite things about the Chicago game were watching Matt Nagy just get absolutely heated multiple times, like he was attempting to get thrown out of the game by the Bears. Finding out that the Bears actually have RC Cola as their main soda of choice in the stadium, which is just so weird to me. And then also that the Bears, probably because it's an extremely old stadium, do not have a vertically built stadium at all. Their stadium is extremely like low, small angle, I'd say. So it's really just like you're going like straight out, and you don't get that like view of like you're ever looking straight down no matter where you were sitting inside the stadium at Soldier Field. So that was interesting. But if you've been looking at news recently with Chicago, they may be building a new stadium soon, and that may not matter. So those were my takeaways from that game. Still a good time. Always happy to watch some football, but honestly, probably the weakest game I saw. Then I have to say, this one takes the cake. First off, the next place I headed after Chicago, I had some good I went to a few places outside of the game in Chicago, and those were cool too to check out. But in terms of just overall experience for the whole thing that I went to, I have to hand it to Nashville. I've been to Nashville before, and I just really like the layout in Nashville. But everything there is so cool. There's so much stuff there, and I don't even like country music, but there's something really cool about that area. And before I went there, I was pretty skeptical about it. But man, once you go, I think you're bound to really enjoy it. And I actually met somebody at school. Although I planned all these trips before I planned to. Although I planned all these trips before I came to Florida State University. Once I got to Florida State University, I found a little bit of a girlfriend, and I decided to invite her to come with me to Nashville because she thought Nashville was a really cool place, and we weren't going to get to see each other over this whole winter break besides then. So I was like, hey, come with me to Nashville. So we had a great time in Nashville. You know, there's so much stuff to do in and around the town, and obviously, the game, Thursday night football game between the Titans and 49ers was absolutely amazing. It seemed like it was the A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel game, and I could not have enjoyed it anymore. If you've been listeners of us, Jake and I, for a long time, then you know that we're huge A.J. Brown fans, and there's nothing like watching a game that basically A.J. Brown got to take over and help win for the Tennessee Titans, and then Deebo Samuel's a heck of a player as well. Accompany that with all the cool things in and around Nashville. It's a great experience. But then one last thing from that, if you're ever like needing to buy tickets for multiple people and you end up buying them separately, or just for yourself, I'll be honest with you, you really don't have to worry about what seat you're buying, because if you're one person, you can find a single seat in nearly every section that is open. And even if you're two people, you can usually find two seats open in a section somewhere. But if you're three people, that's when it starts getting risky. So there's another suggestion for you. Then, after the Nashville game, finally, I get to go to one of the landmark locations in all of sports, and I headed to Green Bay, Wisconsin. On my flight to Green Bay, I sit across from somebody who says, oh, yeah, my brother's on the team. And I look at the guy and I say, I'm thinking to myself, this guy looks like Kurt Benkirk, backup quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. And I was thinking about saying it, but I wasn't really involved in the conversation, so I didn't speak up. And then he said something that made it clear that was who he was talking about. And then finally, once he said that, I spoke up and I said, I was going to say that. I was going to say you look just like him. And then he hit me with my one of my favorite lines anyone has hit me with to this day, which was that, oh, he's my brother-in-law. Like, I'm not related to him. I was like, wow, that is an interesting coincidence. And actually, another special guest arrived with me in Green Bay. This time, my mom knew that I was going on all these trips, and she was just like, I want to do one with you. And she was like, okay, I told her the list of games that I was going to, and she was like, I want to do the one in Green Bay. And then later she found out that it was on Christmas Day, and she was like, oh, that's interesting, but it wasn't enough to stop her. So she still came with me to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and it was awesome there. Really, really small town area. I mean, good vibes for that type of thing. I think, although I didn't really know before what I'd love in terms of like just big cities or small towns or what, I think I'm a little more drawn to smaller areas, and I just like the feeling of some place like Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I have to say the food places we tried there were tremendous, and they had absolutely gigantic portions, which was wonderful. And then I ended up just chilling out with her at the hotel pool and hot tub for the night. Just still, like, all this traveling was wearing me out. So that night before the game, just swam around a bit in the pool, got in the hot tub, chilled out, then hit the hay and got ready for the game on Christmas Day. Obviously, man, the Packers killed the Browns in terms of turnover battle, but it was still a tight game all the way down to the end. And boy, oh boy, is it amazing to see Aaron Rodgers throw a football in real life. It's just unbelievable the windows he can put it in. It's his accuracy or ball placement in terms of like how he's able to throw the ball is unlike anyone else. And it's just really something that I haven't seen any other quarterback be able to recreate, even while attending so many NFL games throughout my lifetime. Meanwhile, though, there was one guy on the opposite sideline that goes by the name of Baker Mayfield, who I just can't help but root for whenever I see him on the field. So I was pulling for the Browns in that game, even though I didn't have a rooting interest in almost all these games that I went to. But that one did end up pulling on me a little bit, rooting for the Browns. Also, Browns were obviously the underdog going into that day, so I was rooting for them, and the Packers pulled it out. It didn't hurt my feelings too much, but just want to be honest with you guys as the viewer there. But it was another great game, and I was really happy to see it in person. So finally, after all that, I have a little break here where I did not go to any more games. It was the end of the season, so there were Sunday games following that Christmas game on Saturday, and then there was a Monday night game. I didn't feel the need to go to all those. I just decided I want to go home. I need to go home for a little while before the break is over. And like I said, I was planning to go to watch the Rams play the Ravens, and the Rams were the only team that I had on my schedule twice to watch over this break where I was going to watch teams. But what ended up happening is I actually dropped that second team that's in the Super Bowl that's not the Bengals for a second time, because once I got home, I realized I want to stay at home for a few more days. I don't want to go to Baltimore. I'll get to hop on another flight and head back down to Tallahassee and Florida State University again soon. So I'll stay home and I'll watch my Buffalo Bills play the Atlanta Falcons at home. And just, as a Bills fan, that was a solid game. But if you're talking about the casual fan not rooting for either team, which I was in most of the games I attended, it wasn't the best game. And honestly, I would have, if I told you that the team I would see the second most this year in person behind the Buffalo Bills was the Atlanta Falcons at the beginning of the year, I would have said, you're crazy. There's no way I'm watching the Falcons multiple times. But I did. I watched them in Atlanta and I watched them in Buffalo. So with that being said, a few great takeaways from the Bills game in Atlanta. I got to go with Jake, my friend from this channel. And his seats are right by the tunnel, so he gets to say a bunch of great stuff to players. Starting off with, I saw Josh Rosen come out of the tunnel for the Atlanta Falcons, and I didn't even say anything initially. I just realized it was him, and out of pure shock, I went, and that like gasp I made Jake laugh so much, because he knew exactly what made me gasp. And not only that, when I made the gasping noise, Josh Rosen looked directly at me like he knew why I did it, but no one else realized who he was. So I think Jake said to me, he was so happy that you didn't actually say anything, like, oh my gosh, that's Josh Rosen, so that like all the Bills fans would pick on him or whatever. Then the three other things I had to say to Falcons player because, when I'm talking to Bills players by the tunnel, it's just encouragement stuff. I obviously had to point out to Olamide Zaccheaus that he has the best name in the NFL. I told AJ Terrell he's a baller, and he just said something like, I know. And Cordell Patterson. Jake and I made sure to tell Cordell Patterson next season, like, yeah, you're coming to Buffalo next season. Like, we need that guy on our team. He would be awesome. So if Cordell Patterson signs with the Bills this offseason, that's going to be tremendous. But after all that, I finally finished that Sunday off and hopped on a plane to head back to Tallahassee here, Florida. And I got back ready for the spring semester at Florida State University. So that's my story on how I went to 6 NFL games in 13 days. And if you've got anything that you're like passionate about and just like see an opportunity where you can actually do something and like enjoy that passion seriously, whether it be like my experience with this or something completely different, I mean, I would just advise doing it before it's too late while you have the opportunity, because I am not going to regret that I did this. And I just hope that everybody in their lifetime can get to do something like I got to do, going to all these NFL games in 1 year. So with that being said, I hope that I maybe provided some insight and maybe even some inspiration to you for something you may want to do. Have a good one.